Hey everybody, Firebox here. I wanted to very quickly go over the hotfix that is currently happening right now. It's going to start in about 8 minutes. I've already seen a lot of doom and gloom about the patch changes. Rest in peace Rogue, I suppose. Let's go over everything that's going to be changed, and I'm going to give my personal input on everything that's going to be happening. First things first, the wipe. The very first one for early access is going to be next Monday, which I think is great, especially with the hacker issue. Reset everything, and hopefully we can get things into a more even state than things are right now. Character levels, items, gold, and skills are going to be reset, which is exactly what I expected. Bluestone shards won't be reset, which is good. Those are for cosmetics. The early access leaderboard's also going to start shortly after wipe, which I think is great for those that want to compete for those. I'm personally hoping that with the changes, Rogue is not going to dominate the boss leaderboards and the high roller leaderboards as much as they were, but we're only going to be able to tell once we see these changes happen. Let's go over the patch notes. An additional character slot has been added, so you can create at least one of each class now. This is fantastic. There was no reason that you could buy 8 characters and only use 7 of them. Never made sense. I'm glad they're doing that. They're going to refund the currency you used to unlock the Bard or Warlock, which is also great. I would love to be able to use the currency back and purchase some of the cosmetics. Game time has been slightly increased for the normal Inferno map. I can't really comment on this because I'm more of a solo player, but I think this is great. I did see some people just complaining that the time felt a little off. I hope this is a overall seen positive change. Game time has been increased for all high roller maps. This is great. I love it. The time that you get in the high roller goblin dungeons, quite honestly, is not enough. I hope this is more of an incentive. It gives you more time to loot and kill your way through the map. There's an additional blue portal, and the Death Swarm closing times have been modified to be slower for the Goblin Cave maps. It says maps plural, meaning to me that it's both the normal and high roller. This is great, especially for the high roller. I noticed that I was having a lot of issue finding a blue portal and even getting out of the game, oftentimes ending up with a huge cluster of 3 to 5 people, all at the very center of the circle, because everyone got pushed right away, and no one really wants to fight each other. The Shrine of Protection physical damage is also going to be reduced from 30% to 15%, which is kind of a big deal. I went to the Shrine as often as I could to get it for fights, because having this buff could just win you the fight straight up. Small nerf. I don't know how it's going to affect team play, but at least for solos, small nerf, but shouldn't be that big of a deal because the buff only lasts for about, I think it's 45 seconds to a minute. Pots and crates are going to give a little bit of XP instead of 0. I love this. It'll help us level up a little bit faster, especially for people like me who try to hit the vase spots and the bookshelf area, which also has a ton of vases on the floor. Silver coins stacked to 30 instead of 25. Yeah, this always should have been the case. You trade stacks of 30. Why do you stack only to 25? That never made sense to me. The armor rating curve has been modified and flattened at the very high range, and the physical reduction cap is going to be 85%. This is great. Fighters needed to be put down a notch. Having 95% durability, 20x your HP. Even at 90%, you're looking at about 10 times your health. Sitting at 85%, I think the math is about 6 times your HP. I don't know 100%, but I want to say it's around that range. This is going to be a really big deal for the fighters that run around at physical damage at max. Alright, the big rogue nerfs are coming. Rogue double jump has been modified to apply a movement speed reduction. The maximum height of the double jump has also been reduced. I don't know how this is going to play out, but I think this is a good start. Rogue double jump gave way too much mobility, and the fact that it had 0 downside meant that you were constantly going after rogues that were using this double jump. I think this is great, and I don't think it maybe even should have been added to the game. Might be kind of a hot take, but I think rogue double jump has always been kind of strong. Let's see how this plays out once the game starts. Rogue's weak point attack reduces the target's armor rating by 40% instead of reducing the physical damage reduction. This is kind of a big deal. I am curious how this is going to affect Rogue, but I don't think we're going to know how this affects Rogue until we can start playing on this patch. Rogue can no longer equip the hand crossbow. I personally have been asking for this for a while. I just made some comments yesterday about this. I don't think the rogue should ever have had the hand crossbow. The fact that they can double jump to near unreachable areas, and they have a hand crossbow that can deal the 20 poison damage as well to spots against melee users that quite literally cannot catch you or anything, I think was just unfun gameplay. I know not everybody's going to agree with me, but that's my stance, and I'm curious to see how rogues are going to be now that they no longer have the hand crossbow option. The fighter's physical damage reduction from taunt has been reduced from 15% to 10%. 5% can be a really big deal, especially once you're reaching that top damage threshold. Now that it's capped at 85%, even 85 is really high against classes that don't have that magic damage, but I would say this is a pretty decent nerf for fighter. Fighter's Barricade gives 50 armor rating instead of 15% physical damage reduction. This is a pretty big nerf too. It's just going to make it that much harder to get to that 85% cap physical damage reduction. I'm a little bit curious if they're going to keep it at 85 or if they're going to end up lowering it even further. Because at this point, any amount they lower it further is just going to be a really, really large nerf to fighter. Ranger's Penetrating Shot now grants 25% more armored penetration. I think this is fine. Rangers were really struggling against high damage resistance fighters. This is going to give them a little bit more option to fight them, especially with the nerfs that they're already going to have. Bard's Din of Darkness, this move was ridiculous. It's been reduced from 10, 30 to 50 to 6, 9, and 12. That is an absolutely huge ratio, and I'm curious how that damage is going to look like once we start seeing gameplay. But I'm inclined to say that those numbers are such a huge difference, you might not see bards use that nearly as much as they used to. The Explosive Bottle and Oil Lantern now do magical damage instead of physical damage. This is interesting. I didn't even know you could really hit people with the Oil Lantern, but I guess that's a thing. The Explosive Bottles doing magic damage might make them more useful, because the fighters that are in full plate, you can now just throw explosive bottles at them, and I would assume it does a lot more damage than they were. This is also going to be really strong against rogues because of how weak they are to magical damage. Maybe we start seeing explosive bottles used way more often than we were. Instruments are now bard only. This always should have been the case. Having other classes such as rogue running around with drums was ridiculous and should never have been a thing to begin with. Significantly reduce the values for physical damage reduction that appear as random attributes on items. This is a pretty big deal too. Now for fighters trying to reach that max 85% cap, it's going to be a lot harder and more expensive for them to get the high PDR stats on those items. Falchion damage has been slightly reduced. I think this is good. The Falchion was kind of overwhelming, and I think one of the, if not the best, one-handed weapon in the game. Overall, I think that's probably a positive change. The Windlass Crossbow has 25% armor penetration. I don't feel like I ever see people use this weapon. Having a little bit armor penetration, maybe we start seeing some use. I think that's a good change. Crossbow has 20% armor penetration. Again, I see it used somewhat, but the longbow seems to always take precedent. Hopefully we start to see a little bit more use of these other weapons from this change. Hand crossbow has 5% armor penetration. I think this is fine, being that we now do not have rogues using them. We'll have to see how the gameplay works out, but 5% is kind of a small amount. I think this is fine. Flanged Mace and Morningstar have 15% armor penetration. I don't think they had armor penetration before, correct me if I'm wrong, but if this is just being given a 15%, this is just a straight buff to that class. As someone who plays Cleric, this is fine with me. I don't know if this is going to be seen as OP or anything like that, but still, I'm perfectly fine with this change. Warmaul has 30% armor penetration. I think this is fine. The Warmaul seemed pretty underused as a Cleric. I never really wanted it because it was so heavy. Maybe we start seeing some more use out of that weapon. Magic Staff now has magical damage by default. That is interesting. Maybe we start seeing magic staffs used more, but I still think they're not going to be able to compete with spellbooks just because of the cast speed and the movement speed that they have. I could see us having more magic staff buffs in the future. Reduce the base projectile damage reduction values for plate armor. I think this is fine. Plate armor is just really overused right now. Hopefully with all of these nerfs, we start to see a little bit more meta changing with everyone running fighters and rogues. And that's going to be all of the current changes coming in this patch that should be live in the next 2 hours. Let me know what you think about these changes in the comments below, what you think about my personal thoughts. I think these changes are really just overall good for the game. I don't really see any downside to really anything that was placed here, and I'm looking forward to playing this when it does release. Thanks all. Have a good day.